This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. The experts have decided it wasn't just the suspect bolt that caused this country's worst air crash last Friday. They have found what they called grave and potentially dangerous deficiencies in the DC-10 engine mounts. So today, the Federal Aviation Administration grounded all 134 DC-10s operated by U.S. Airlines, the first grounding of an entire jetliner fleet in the nation's history. Richard Roth reports from Washington.
Today's directive immediately grounding all U.S.-operated DC-10s came as a result of inspections ordered by the Federal Aviation Administration yesterday. Inspections that FAA Administrator Langhorne Bond said turned up bigger problems.
These inspections are turning up grave and potentially dangerous deficiencies in many of the pylon mountings now being checked as a result of that order. These problems are not just with the bolts, but also in other areas of the assembly that holds DC-10 engines to the wings. The whole fleet is going to be down immediately. How long it stays down is another matter.
Before a DC-10 can resume flight, the order requires a complete inspection of all points linking the plane's 9,000-pound engines with its wings, not just bushings and bolts like those implicated in the Chicago crash, which attach the engine pylon or support to the underside of the wing. In addition to grounding DC-10s, the government order requires the inspection, but not grounding, of all Boeing 747 and Lockheed 1011 wide-body aircraft. Bond said engineers were not certain what caused the deficiencies in engine mountings, which he said apparently include metal fatigue, parts that cracked or weakened prematurely. But he implied that some aspects of the FAA's certification process, which all aircraft undergo before approval for flight, and which in the case of the DC-10 has been criticized by the Airline Pilots Association and by Ralph Nader, may have been at fault.
There's no question somewhere along the way that we didn't do it right.
James King of the National Transportation Safety Board, in charge of investigating the Chicago crash, told reporter Charles Gomez today's FAA order raises new concerns.
This time we're almost experimenting on what the maintenance and inspection process should be for the DC-10, and now we find ourselves trying to construct a set of maintenance and corrective action following a catastrophic accident.
FAA Administrator Bond said he hoped the order would not disrupt air traffic, but added if that is necessary, that will be the case. In fact, among the first passengers affected was a safety board official bringing metal samples from the Chicago crash here for analysis. Because of the DC-10 groundings, his flight was delayed. Richard Roth, CBS News, Washington.
The cancellation or the grounding of the DC-10 has forced cancellation, of course, of some flights. Some airline officials urge the passengers holding tickets for DC-10 flights check with airline information. We have two reports on the effects of the day's developments, beginning with Mitchell Krause in New York.
United Airlines, just over a strike, had grounded its DC-10 fleet even before the FAA order. In Minneapolis, Northwest Airlines is scrambling to find other planes while the DC-10 inspection goes forward. American Airlines is in the same boat. The other U.S. carriers with DC-10s, Western, Continental, National, are combining flights using alternate aircraft or canceling flights altogether. But the 8th U.S. carrier, World Airways, which started regularly scheduled budget fare flights just 6 weeks ago, says it will continue to fly its 6 DC-10s because it believes it's complying with the FAA order. Foreign airlines are not bound by the FAA grounding order. Not all are complying. But Lufthansa says it's grounded all its DC-10 flights, including today's New York to Lima flight with 146 passengers booked, some of whom have been delayed for 2 days because of an earlier FAA-ordered inspection. All British airlines have also grounded their DC-10s on British government orders. The Japanese have done the same. Further adding to the day's confusion was the FAA inclusion of the European-made A300 Airbus flown by Eastern Airlines. But Eastern has now been advised that the A300's pylon is so different from the DC-10s that it won't be grounded, but will receive the same special inspection review ordered by the FAA for all wide-bodied aircraft operating in the U.S. Mitchell Krause, CBS News, New York.
The order to ground the aircraft came so fast it left bewilderment and confusion at Chicago's O'Hare Field. At American Airlines, passengers boarded several DC-10s and then sat more than an hour before being taken off the grounded planes. At United, instead of boarding, passengers could look through the glass and see mechanics examining the bolts on their DC-10, hardly an encouraging sign. Then came the announcement.
For those of you that are not aware of it, the FAA has grounded all DC-10s.
Others preferred inconvenience to flying on a plane which was suspect in any way.
I mean, I've been here since 10 o'clock this morning. I paid $154 for a one-way ticket to Phoenix, and this is what you get. I just can't believe it.
I'd much rather be grounded than to take off and get myself killed or something.
At some counters, ticket agents had trouble controlling unhappy passengers.
Front, you're all on. Now, folks, hold on. Hold on right here. Okay. Who's pushing over here? Just hold on a second, folks.
There were 9 DC-10s at O'Hare when the grounding order came, and in the afternoon, others arrived. They had been in the air when the directive was issued. One of the last DC-10s to arrive was American 630 from Phoenix. It landed at 1:31 p.m. Had the grounding order not been issued, it would have refueled and continued on to Los Angeles as American 191. Don Webster, CBS News, Chicago.
It's not certain how long the DC-10 grounding will last because the airlines say they have not been informed what the inspection process should consist of. Besides the 3 foreign airlines Krause mentioned, 3 others, Laker, Alitalia, and Swiss Air, have grounded their DC-10s. 27 other foreign airlines say they're inspecting theirs but haven't yet grounded them. In Chicago today, the first lawsuit was filed in connection with the American Airlines crash. The wife and son of an Austrian are asking almost $16 million from the airline and 2 manufacturers. But as Terry Drinkwater reports from Los Angeles, there are other indications of troubled financial skies for the firm that makes the DC-10s.
Since the first DC-10 was rolled out of the McDonnell Douglas hangars here in 1970, there had been no changes in the design of the pylons which hold the engines to the wings. The new jets now being built will be modified as soon as authorities learn precisely what the structural defect is. The company now has firm orders for 50 additional DC-10s, with 50 more conditional orders. Some of those options to buy may not be exercised by the airlines if the grounding lasts long and if passengers continue to wonder about the safety of the plane. Nearly 15,000 work on the DC-10. Among them, there is deep concern, mostly because they too don't yet know what went wrong with the planes. Meanwhile, the FAA is characterizing the problems with the DC-10 as grave and potentially dangerous, created a public relations nightmare for company executives.
We don't really know what the impact is going to be on McDonnell Douglas or on the traveling public, except that the DC-10 is a very busy airplane.
Indeed, so busy that 240 million people have ridden on them. In recent years, the DC-10 has become the mainstay of the company's commercial plane division, though government military contracts account for nearly 3/4 of McDonnell Douglas's total income. Today, on the exchanges, the company's stock was down nearly 3 points from Friday. A protracted grounding will hurt some airlines more than others. Continental, for example, which relies on the DC-10s for most all of their flights from Los Angeles to Chicago and Honolulu. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Los Angeles.
A surprising message to Rolaids users. Tums neutralizes 1/3 more acid than Rolaids. Watch this familiar demonstration. 1 Rolaids and 1 Tums tablet are added to stomach acid. Both neutralize the acid. But on those occasions, when your stomach has even this much more excess acid, Tums can still absorb it. Rolaids can't, because tablet for tablet, Tums neutralizes 1/3 more acid than Rolaids. For acid indigestion and heartburn, take Tums.
Sure hope you got what I want.
What's wrong?
Pain, itch, hemorrhoids. Been driving all day, and I need Preparation H.
Right. Gives many people temporary relief for hours. Combines active ingredients to relieve pain and itch. Helps shrink swelling of inflamed hemorrhoidal tissue.
That's real medicine. I'll take ointment and suppositories.
Hi. Feeling better?
Thanks to you, good buddy.
Preparation H for hemorrhoidal flare-ups relieves pain and itch, helps shrink swelling.
President Carter held his 50th news conference today, and most of it, including a long opening statement, dealt with the energy crisis. Leslie Stahl reports.
Looking more drawn and older than he has been, President Carter opened the news conference with a statement about one of his more recent frustrations, gasoline shortages.
Today, by executive order, I'm delegating to all the nation's governors the authority
to help manage our gasoline supplies over the summer.
Under the order, the governors will be able to require gas stations to stay open on weekends, establish minimum purchase levels, and impose odd even day sale systems. On another issue, he was asked if he has any disagreement with a suggestion by Democratic Party Chairman John White that Senator Kennedy should make an unequivocal statement taking himself out of the presidential race in the interest of party unity.
I don't have any quarrel to make with the statement that was issued by John White. No, I do not disagree with this statement. I don't really have any comment to make about what Senator Kennedy does. He's made statements repeatedly about what he would do. Let me make this point. No president can expect to have unanimous support, even within one's own party. This has been the case with every predecessor of mine who lived in the White House. But that's not my major concern. I'm not an announced candidate, and I don't intend to make every judgment about what ought to be done for this country on the basis of whether it would or would not lose support. I don't believe anyone can accuse me of trying to gain a vote, for instance, by my energy proposals. They've just lost votes.
In view of the confidence and friendship you have expressed publicly for Mr. Lance, I wondered if you could share with us your reaction to the indictment and your feeling about Mr. Lance at this time as a person.
Burt Lance is still my friend. I don't see any benefit to be derived from my commenting on the actions that are presently underway within the legal system of our country.
On other issues, the president said the country is better off with his wage price guidelines than without them. He said that because of inflation, he does not plan to propose the usual election year tax cut in 1980. And when asked about his leadership over Congress, he said, the American people are beginning to feel that their government can't deal adequately with crucial issues like inflation and energy. He added that that's the way it's going to be in Washington until the American public gets aroused and starts putting pressure on Congress. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, the White House.
It might be said that the energy shortage saved 34 lives over the Memorial Day weekend. The National Safety Council reported that 508 persons died on the nation's highways this year compared to 542 last year. And a spokesman says, unofficially, the decrease probably is because of reduced driving and stricter enforcement of the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. A federal prosecutor in Los Angeles says he will seek dismissal of charges against a man seized with a blank pistol in an alleged conspiracy to assassinate President Carter. The prosecutor said there's not enough evidence to prosecute 35-year-old Raymond Lee Harvey, who was arrested May 5th during Mr. Carter's visit to California.
Come on, we gotta throw strikes now. You gotta keep that ball low.
Is that the bird about to cool off with orange juice?
Right! I drink 2 or 3 glasses a day. You know it isn't just for breakfast anymore.
Say, Yvonne Goolagong, you going to quench that thirst with orange juice?
Florida orange juice tastes great anytime. It isn't just for breakfast anymore. And it's 100% pure juice.
Potato chips and orange juice together?
All right!
Orange juice from Florida. It isn't just for breakfast anymore.
Back half of my head. Colin Gardenier has a headache.
Will you try extra strength Tylenol?
I will try it if it's going to help. Compare the levels of medicine on the leading regular and extra ingredient pain relievers. Extra strength Tylenol has more medicine.
How do you feel?
Super. My headache has disappeared. I was about to ask you if I could take some of these with me. It seems to really have done the job. Extra strength Tylenol, aspirin free, and you can't buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription. I feel great.
In San Antonio, Texas today, a federal judge, famed and feared for his stiff sentences, was shot and killed. It was the second time in 7 months an official involved in West Texas drug investigations was the target of a shooting. David Dick reports.
A medical rescue team tried to restore breathing, tried to restart the heartbeat. But 63-year-old federal district judge John Wood Jr. lay motionless by the side of his car outside his San Antonio apartment. His wife stood in the doorway, unable to help. Judge Wood had left his home to drive to the courthouse this morning when he was gunned down, according to first reports, by a rifle bullet fired from the rear from as close as 10 feet away. The judge was pronounced dead on arrival at a local hospital. Judge John Wood Jr. had earned himself a nickname, Maximum John, because of the tough sentences he had handed down to those convicted of drug crimes. He had been scheduled to preside at the upcoming drug conspiracy trial of Las Vegas gambler Jimmy Chagra, whose brother Lee, an attorney, was murdered last December. John Wood Jr. was appointed to his judgeship by President Nixon in 1971. Although a Republican, Wood also had the support of many local Democrats. Chief Federal Judge Adrian Spears commented on the man.
He's a very popular man among people that know him and have known him all of his life. This is so incredible. And this is what makes it so unbelievable. Because a certain element doesn't like the fact that he insisted upon enforcing the law, there's no reason to kill him.
Last November, a U.S. prosecutor also involved in drug cases was injured by gunfire here in San Antonio. Protective custody was ordered at that time for Judge Wood. A U.S. Marshal said the protection for the judge had been lifted because he had not been threatened and felt he didn't need it. David Dick, CBS News, San Antonio.
Attorney General Bell dispatched one of the FBI's top criminal investigators to look into the murder of Judge Wood. And Bell also placed 4 other federal judges in the area under special protection. A California court has released Dan White's tape-recorded confession of killing San Francisco's mayor and a city supervisor last November 27th. White, himself a supervisor who had resigned, was convicted last week. Bernard Goldberg reports.
The prosecution had introduced Dan White's sobbing tape-recorded confession to prove White's guilt. White wept as he heard his words played in court. So did some of the jurors. And many believe the taped confession actually won sympathy for White, who said he went to see Mayor Moscone in order to get his supervisor's job back. Moscone refused.
He sat down, he was talking, and nothing was getting through to me. It was just like a roaring in my ears, and just all the time knowing he's going to go out and lie to the press and tell them, you know, that I wasn't a good supervisor and that people didn't want me, and then that was it. Then I just shot him.
Dan White shot George Moscone repeatedly and then went to see another political opponent, Supervisor Harvey Milk. Despite the fact that he had just murdered the mayor, White says he merely wanted to talk to Milk.
I started to say, you know, how hard I worked for it and what it meant to me and my family and my reputation as a hard-working, good, honest person, and he just kind of smirked at me as if to say, too bad. And then I just got all flushed and hot, and I shot him.
The prosecution had asked for a conviction of first-degree murder, which carries a possible death sentence. White was found guilty of manslaughter. He will be sentenced next month and faces up to 8 years in prison. Bernard Goldberg, CBS News, San Francisco.
The Supreme Court has struck down a New Jersey law giving a tax break to parents with children in private and parochial schools. The law had permitted a $1,000 deduction for each child in such a school. The 6-3 ruling upheld lower court decisions that this violates the constitutional requirement for separation of church and state. Chrysler Corporation has announced that it will permanently shut down its Hamtramck, Michigan plant, which turned out its first car in 1914. The company said the shutdown to reduce losses will occur at the end of the 1980 model year. Chrysler said it will transfer 1,800 employees and lay off some 2,200. Montgomery Ward today agreed to pay a $175,000 civil penalty, the largest ever under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. The Federal Trade Commission had charged Wards with failing to record and disclose the principal reasons it denied credit to customers. The stock market today was mixed in moderate trading.
One of our most important dances was in celebration for the bountiful goodness of maize, what you call corn. Today, Mazola margarine knows all about the goodness of corn. Mazola margarine is made from corn oil goodness, so Mazola margarine has no cholesterol naturally. And Mazola tastes fresh and delicious naturally. Remember Mazola margarine. It gets goodness from maize.
I'll tell you, my Bernice knows what's good for me.
And what's good for me, too. Like new Kellogg's Most. It's different from any nutritional cereal you can buy.
Kellogg's Most cereal contains a multivitamin and iron supplement, the goodness of wheat germ, and the high fiber of bran, all woven into a combination of ingredients no other cereal offers, and a crunchy wheat taste.
Terrific.
With all that going for you, why settle for less?
Than most.
Senate ratification of the new Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement with the Soviet Union is by no means certain. And now there's a new complication that may strengthen the argument of critics who say the treaty does not go far enough. Marvin Kalb reports.
U.S. officials disclosed that the Russians last year proposed a ban on new land-based intercontinental missiles as part of the SALT Treaty, but the administration rejected the proposal. Two reasons are offered. First, the administration felt Congress would not approve of the treaty unless the U.S. reserved the option of building the new MX missile, mobile, land-based, and intercontinental. Second, the U.S. felt for strategic reasons that it needed the MX, in part to reduce Russia's edge in long-range missiles. So the administration said no, thus killing the chance of getting a treaty that would eliminate new land-based missiles. The new treaty allows each side to add one new land-based missile to its strategic arsenal. Officials now argue that the Russians made their proposal primarily to stop the U.S. from building the MX because the Russians didn't need any new ICBMs and presumably the U.S. did. Officials are not happy about discussing the Soviet proposal because they fear it may complicate Senate debate of the SALT Treaty. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
While Israeli gunboats and long-range artillery were shelling Palestinian positions in southern Lebanon today, 3 other Israeli warships became a further symbol of peace with Egypt. They entered the Suez Canal and took on an Egyptian pilot, prompting one of the Israeli commanders to remark, "I would have never believed it if I wasn't seeing it." More on this from Mike Lee.
The Akziv and 2 other Israeli Navy landing craft today hoisted the red, black, and white of Egypt right alongside the Star of David and steamed into the history books as the first Israeli military ships ever to pass through that long-standing symbol of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Suez Canal. The new peace treaty gives Israeli ships access to the 110-year-old man-made desert shortcut from the Gulf of Suez to the Mediterranean. The crew of the Akziv greeted Egyptian naval officers with handshakes and embraced them like long-lost friends. As the convoy entered the canal at Port Tawfiq, there were but a few people along the banks to greet it. The Egyptian government, which is capable of turning out 1 million or so well-wishers on short notice, was today playing it low-key. It would be expecting too much too soon for the masses of Egyptian people to applaud the Israeli military, which had blockaded the canal during the '67 war and held it hostage for 6 years. Reminders of that fighting could still be seen along the canal, bombed out in pockmarked buildings, and a captured Israeli tank. The Egyptian people were not overflowing with enthusiasm, but there does seem to be a feeling here that it's better to have the Israelis passing through the canal than trying to overtake it. Mike Lee, CBS News, along the Suez Canal.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Court charged today that the CIA was behind the recent assassinations of 2 revolutionary leaders. It claimed that Richard Helms, formerly director of the CIA and later ambassador to Iran, had created the right-wing group that claimed responsibility for the killings. 89 years of white minority government in Rhodesia came to an end today. The 2 top officials of the country's new black majority government, Prime Minister Abel Muzorewa and President Josiah Gumede, were sworn in. They will take power on Friday. Looking on was a somber former Prime Minister Ian Smith, who said he wished the transition had not happened as quickly as it did, but added there was no alternative. The problems awaiting Muzorewa are great. The results of 6 years of war, a decade of sanctions, and a domestic political crisis. Another problem is white flight. More than twice as many whites have left Rhodesia in the first 4 months of this year as in the same period last year. The Hong Kong government today allowed a British freighter loaded with 982 Vietnamese refugees to dock there. The permission came after the British government said it would accept the refugees as immigrants. Prime Minister Thatcher said they would be taken in on humanitarian grounds. The freighter picked up the refugees last week from 2 sinking boats near Vietnam.
Maxwell House
House is coffee you can count on.
Maxwell House, good to the last drop.
Maxwell House is
good every time.
Maxwell House is
good morning.
Good to the last drop. Maxwell House.
ADC brand from Maxwell House, specially blended and ground for new coffee makers. A perfect taste and always good to the last drop.
Maxwell House is
good morning.
Good to the last drop. Maxwell House.
If you're a responsible person and you're fed up with people who aren't, you belong on Safeco Street. Because you're the careful type, your local independent Safeco agent can help you save on all kinds of insurance. For your car, your camper, your boat, for your business, your home, even your life. After all, it's the people we don't insure that make Safeco such a good deal for those we do.
Mary Pickford died today in Santa Monica, California. Miss Pickford was 86. She was admitted to the hospital Friday because of heart palpitations. Her career summed up the gold, glory, and glamour of the silent screen era. Morton Dean narrates this report in New York.
Mary Pickford. Her name is indelibly printed on the roster of Hollywood's all-time greats. She was the world's first movie queen. America's sweetheart, she was called. It has been said that no other star has been able to match her popularity around the world. Born in Toronto, the 8th of April, 1893. Her name at birth, Gladys Smith. Her first role, In Stock, age 5. Broadway at age 14. Her first big film hit, Hearts Adrift, in 1914. Some other hits, Pollyanna, 1920, Poor Little Rich Girl, 1917. And her first Oscar was for her first talkie, Coquette. A second Oscar came much later for her contributions to the industry. Her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks Sr. was as big a hit as any of her movies. She, the movie queen, he, the movie king. She was also an astute businesswoman, and for a time was one of the richest women in the country. Reclusive for the last 15 years or so, she said, "They have my movies. Let them remember me that way." We will. Morton Dean, CBS News, New York.
Buddy Rogers, Miss Pickford's husband of more than 40 years, was at her bedside when she died. And that's the way it is, Tuesday, May 29th, 1979. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.